So again, I want to welcome everyone to the Native Veterans Resilience and Wellness Skills Peer Support Provider broadcast today. We have with us as facilitators and presenters Ray Daw, David Natsaway, and I'm also hoping Sean Baer, our co-director here at the National Center, may join us as well. Can you advance the slide, please? This webinar is provided by the National American Alaska Native HTC. It's a program that is funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA. The American Indian Alaska Native HTC is supported by a grant from CSAT and SAMHSA. The content of this webinar is the creation of the presenters, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA, HHS, or the American Indian Alaska Native HTC. As I had mentioned earlier, the follow-up to today's webinar, you will have a link posted in the chat box where you will be able to complete a short survey. If you're not able to do that during the course of the broadcast today, we will reach out to you via email and give you another, offer you another opportunity to complete that survey. But we appreciate your feedback and look forward to hearing from you. As you know, most of you know now that you are muted currently. You have the option to unmute yourself if you would like to engage in conversation or have questions or comments during the broadcast. And you can also utilize the chat box for questions, and we will monitor that during the broadcast to make sure that we address those in the order they come in. So feel free to use the chat box or unmute yourself and join the conversation accordingly. So I think with that, again, I want to welcome you all to today's broadcast. It's great to see you. I think we'll pull up the slide deck and for Mr. Daw and for David Natsaway, and I will turn the floor over to Ray at this point, and we'll go from there. So thank you, and enjoy the broadcast. Ray, you may be muted still.
Here I am yammering away, but thank you, Steve, for the intros, and good to see everyone, and Brother David from Laguna, and I believe we have that, but we're going to begin with a blessing, and I'll go ahead and do that, and we can proceed afterwards. Bashis Hojondo be Trayada or the Anil Natsugo. A Jean Lango Hinago and Dahas a did so the Zimbenature. Betanit Adolil, be Trayada or Adolil, Ben Hiltahojon, be Nasco, Dahit Adolil, or Nascon Sede Casolil, Nasco Yat or de Nijnistolil. I don't Nasco Yat not Deliado little sort of schnickui. By Hitichi or Calico don Nasco sto, Junco Chian Lini Tron Linita. Chidasil inolil dobi hitrayana tawat ilil. Hitseason dinikodo. Tratabel nigetrahulzel dolil. Dodi na getranas nigi. Gecharnil badolil. So de schnittigen kui. Da jetzt das in Ishla. By Kudo Hujanasli. Thank you. A quick explanation. In the Navajo way, we honor where we are. We are between our mother, earth. They say earth, but it's the world, and our father, which is the universe, the sky. They say sky, but it's actually universe. Yeah, that's just. We live between these two creations, and as human beings, that's where we are. So in the Navajo way, we honor both. We walk on the earth and we breathe all. We get sunlight, air, and things that sustain us from the sky. And that's how we begin our prayers. They're our father and mother, basically. Also, went and asked for us who are veterans and those of us who are allies, people who help veterans, to have a good learning opportunity, a good talking opportunity, a good teaching opportunity, and that we take the words we hear and into our being, our mind, and our heart, that we carry ourselves forward well, and continuing our good intentions for who we're here for today. Also, that asking for blessings for the food we take, the water we drink, to sustain our body, so that we can have a clear mind and a clear heart as we take the words we hear and learn from on into the rest of the day, and to carry us through the rest of the days ahead of us, each of us like that, and for everything, all things possible to be good, and for us to be continue to be good people. So in a nutshell, that's what my blessing was about. Okay, in the context of what we're going to be going through today. So I wanted to explain that and make sure that you understand, we understand, you understand where I come from with our times together. Go ahead and get into the slide. If you have any questions or anything along the way, just unmute yourself, and because our intention here is to have dialogue. We're a diverse group of 28 people, and we have 28 different kinds of experiences in our work and in our lives. And those of us that are veterans, we have that same number of experiences as veterans. My veteran experience is not the same as my brother's, David, and others, the rest of you that are here. And so everyone, we all have unique experiences, and that's what we bring to this table, to share, to support each other, and to learn. And so unmute yourself if you have a question, or put a comment in chat if you want, if you like to. And I should say Mike Bricker, Yate. And so that's what we're here for. We begin with an overview. We have three primary things that we want to continually stress in our sessions. One is to give us that opportunity to support each other. The second is to provide opportunity for veteran family members and providers to learn and support each other and ourselves and the people that we're here for. Also, to give an opportunity for us to have a learning collaborative for our veterans that expands our service access and resources. There's three primary things that we hope to do in our time together. Next slide, please. just been quite about maybe months now since we've had time to visit the path that we were on. And we had 2 sessions on equine therapy, and then the session 2 weeks ago on sweat lodge. Really great presentations. I really enjoyed them, learned a lot. And that's all around how we define trauma and what it is, and then how we describe it. Those 2 modalities that we got introduced to by allies and veteran psychologists is around that. Much of our work is around supporting our veterans who experience this trauma and how they describe it. Go ahead, Steve. And the second thing that's always primary in our discussions with veterans is the suicide deaths that happen and suicide attempts that happen. It's even worse than now with the pandemic, not only with veterans, but across society, the American society, and across the world. Next slide, please. There's some prevention tips that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and you all will get a copy of these slides. So I'm going to go through these slides really quickly and get to the area that we're going to begin from. Suicide tip 1, it's always important, and almost all suicide prevention approaches that are out there beginning to spot warning signs. That's almost always right up there on top. And this process is the same with that. Go ahead, Steve. And when we recognize or identify a veteran or soldier who is contemplating self-harm or taking their lives, then it means an immediate action is necessary. And we talk with our veteran around what they're contemplating, and work out a way to move them from that contemplation of self-harm towards creating a plan to continue their life and not to hurt themselves. Go ahead. Okay. And these are some four steps that are possible to take, and they're not, like I said, they're not very different from a lot of other suicide prevention approaches that are out there. Creating a plan, identifying talking on when they were thinking about doing them, and how serious are they intending to take their own life. These are 4 things that are structured to pretty much all suicide prevention approaches. Go ahead, Ellen. And the third thing is to offer support, and we'll all do a job at that. To get into this field of veteran support and services, we end up being very way of being that you all bring to our veterans and our military people and the families. The families have these kinds of traumatic experiences also. Go ahead. There's some other tips that you'll see in the slide, in the PowerPoint that you get later on. One key point here, I think, is right in the middle there, is to use good judgment, but to be persistent in your caring. We know through research across the board with children, communities, families, civilians, and also veterans, that expression of that is probably the most important thing we can do with anybody who's been traumatized, whether it's childhood trauma, military service trauma, or domestic violence trauma, or historical trauma, or intergenerational trauma. It's that caring that helps settle people's hearts and minds. Next slide, Ellen. Because all this trauma that we talk about across these different kinds of populations that we have, and veterans in particular, we we do touch on post-traumatic stress syndrome. It is very much there. And last month we did go over this slide, but the important thing about this slide to me is that there are differences between between how trauma is experienced across the different conflicts that we've had over time. Vietnam veterans at the bottom, you see about 30% are estimated to have PTSD in their lifetime. It's just over a lifetime. We know that Vietnam era and Vietnam veterans right now we're largely in our 60s, 70s, and 80s. That's our age group, 60s, 70s, 80s. And as we age, sometimes we reflect on our lives and we have triggers that come to us on PTSD, and that might, and that's what happens. And the more recent conflicts that we've had, like the Gulf War and Operation Iraqi Freedom, we don't see as much PTSD being reported, but that is likely to change as veterans from those conflicts age on. And that's something to be important, because someone is saying they're good today and looking good today doesn't mean that they're going to be like that in the rest of their lives. There are triggers that happen to all of us that are veterans. And these triggers sometimes become a little more persistent and a little more pronounced. And so PTSD is not, well, you all know that PTSD isn't just finite and concrete. There's a lot of fluctuation to how we experience PTSD. And so this is important information to realize, I think, for me, because this helps me understand where a young veteran from Enduring Freedom, for example, might be coming from. And the PTSD experiences are a lot different. I mean, I had a dialogue with a Vietnam veteran about a couple of weeks ago. Where actually it was on Facebook. I showed a picture of a melon that was caught on the street gutter, the street drain, and there's a melon right on the edge of the street game, and someone said to me that I should have picked up the melon. My response to that person on social media was, I thought about it, but then I got really concerned about booby traps. And that's a Vietnam experience. A fellow Vietnam vet said the same thing, said I wouldn't come near something like that because the first thing that triggers in my mind from my experience is booby trap. And that was a really strong influence among us. Those of us that are trained for the Vietnam War were continually drilled to not pick up things in the field and to avoid things that looked innocent and non-threatening because they were more likely to be booby trapped. And that's an example of how these variations occur across the different kinds of conflicts. These days, I think it's a lot different with the kinds of explosive devices that are used in many of the theaters of operation in the world today. But I just wanted to explain that part of how Vietnam veterans and Vietnam era veterans view our world today. And it's, my veterans organization where I'm from, we do trash picking, and the Vietnam veterans who have infantry veterans especially have a difficult time with that. And so they'll end up being, yeah.
Can I jump in here? I have an example of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an individual that I was working with. So out here in New Mexico, the drive between the reservation Laguna and Albuquerque, this is a Gulf War Iraqi veteran. The drive between Laguna and Albuquerque looks a lot like where he was.
Mm,
And his wife told me he has a hard time driving back and forth.
mhm,
Because he fears the IED
mhm.
just on that drive. And
Yeah.
in talking with him, a lot of the roads around the reservation, he has a problem a lot of times just driving around the reservation because it looks a lot like where he was.
Mhm,
Even just going outside and doing yard work,
mhm,
um, he'll have flashbacks.
mhm.
So so just along that same lines, yeah, it's different for different era veterans,
Mhm.
and that, that's what these guys on the reservation, that's what they're some of them, that's what they're experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really good example of the more recent conflicts. And you're right, Dave. The conflicts going on in Iraq, the topography and the geographies is more like New Mexico, Arizona. I can understand that, and the influence that explosive devices have on just moving around because we're so dependent on driving in the heavily rural areas like New Mexico. And that wouldn't occur to me because in the Vietnam period, IUDs were not prevalent. It was more booby trapping. You had to really be alert to booby traps. And so we're having a discussion now about the kinds of PTSD experiences that our veterans have across different theaters of operation. And these are good things to know, and that's where this slide begins to touch on those variations that we're seeing. And as you're talking, Dave, I was reflecting on the younger veterans in my home community and how we have a real difficult time having them come out to our veterans meetings. And some of them express exactly what you're describing, anxiety about getting out and going out on the road and being out and about. They tend to be a little more homebound than us older ones. And so that's a really good statement you've made, David. Thank you very much for that. Next slide, please. There are differences across suicide deaths as well, and just across regions. Regionally, there are regional differences in suicide deaths, and that's what this slide is intended to show. And there's a reference there on the side there you can look at. And these regional differences are important for me to know because then it gives me some insight on how and what to speak about if I go from like a national audience to a Southwestern audience. Go ahead, next slide. As we're talking, Steve made a really good suggestion. If you have ideas or thoughts about other topics that you might be interested in hearing about, or even you talking about, please let us know. Because we want to make sure that our time together is beneficial for everyone. Okay, so share your ideas on future topics, and if you, as a veteran or a provider, have a theme or topic that you like to bring to the table, let us know. If you come on board and do a presentation, for example, you will get compensated for that, and so there's a gain for that. One of the ladies that did a talk on equine assisted therapy, for example, took her compensation and donated it back to another veterans organization. Another lady took her compensation and donated it to a food bank. And that's one of the things that can happen. But you get compensated for coming online and basically joining us on a webinar presentation, doing a webinar presentation. Age and gender, there are age and gender differences across across veterans groups. You see males having more problems with suicide than females, and that's kind of normal, I think, considering the number of men that are in the military versus the number of women. But that's there, and then a lot more. There are more women joining combat operations these days than ever before, and but you'll see this variation across age demographics as well, and it's good information to know. Next slide, please. Okay. Once again, a chart on how different military eras are affected by suicide, and you'll see how that variation occurs from peacetime veterans to Vietnam and all the way down to World War II. Go ahead, next slide. In the civilian world, there are risk factors for suicide that are talked about pretty regularly, and you're all probably pretty familiar with this. and there are these same risk factors that occur for veterans. So one of the questions I would have for you is how these civilian risk factors, how do they compare for you as a veteran or as a provider for veterans? Which one of these kind of stand out as probably having a stronger significance? Anybody have any thoughts? John, I want to apologize. I'm sitting in my vehicle doing a talk, and yeah, you're hearing barking in the background. I have a neighbor who's got a small dog. He just barks at everything, bugs and whatnot. But I have to do my presentation from the cars because my family, we experienced a COVID infection a few months ago. We began quarantining. And so to quarantine myself and protect my family and try to give you some privacy, I end up joining a lot of these webinars in my car. It's a best place right now for me to do this, and I envision this happening for the rest of the term of the pandemic until my family feels safer and I feel better. But this is the extent to which we have to practice physical distancing, I think. So, John, you're right. There is barking and as I'm talking, and I apologize for that, but I have a lot of choice on that, I think, today. So on the risk factors, one major risk factor that veterans experience is our relationship problems. And we hear about relationship problems continually among veterans, not only while they're in service, but also when they get out, discharged from the military. There are a disproportionate number of veterans who end up having real serious relationship problems. Marriages, you all know marriages break up when men and women are in the military. And marriages break up when veterans return from the military. That's probably one of the most serious problems we have with veterans coming out is our relationship problems. I don't know too many veterans who don't have relationship problems when they come out. And when we come back from the military, we're changed people. We're not the same men or women that we were before we went in. And as changed people and get discharged, then we bring the characteristics that we end up assimilating into and acculturating into, we bring that back out into the civilian world. and many of these characteristics that we bring back into the civilian world oftentimes are not appropriate or not in sync with how civilians are and civilians can expect. I mean, and that translates to relationship problems, not only in marriages, but relationship problems in work, relationship problems socially. And I, from the experiences that I've had and from my discussions with fellow veterans, that's probably one of the more deeper problems that end up happening. See, I'm looking at the chat. So that I think is one of the main issues with veterans as in comparison to civilian risk problems. The second thing that kind of comes out as another major concern for veterans are physical abilities and illness. You know, there are many of us who discharge and come out with physical disabilities and develop physical disabilities while in service. You know, I'm an Army vet, and I operated field artillery. That was my job, was field artillery, shooting howitzers. And so I have pretty significant hearing impairment, and that impairment happened while I was still in and carried on out. And I'm using that as my experience as an example of how physical disabilities develop in service and stay with us with the rest of our lives. You know, and a lot of combat vets are hearing impaired, and we do our best to compensate for the hearing impairment, but oftentimes it is frustrating for our family members and co-workers and people in the civilian world to appreciate how significant that hearing impairment can be. And when I'm in the house, for example, I'll oftentimes don't wear my hearing aids, and I'll hear my family talking, and then I'll say, "Did I hear you guys say this?" I'll make a comment of some kind, and about 75% of the time, I'm wrong. I'm not. I'll be saying something different from what they're talking about, and then they'll all chime in and say, "Dad, you put in your hearing aids so you can hear us. We're talking about this, and you're over here." So I get kind of teased a lot, but nonetheless, that happens a lot. And because it's with my family, I feel I can take a risk on saying what I think I'm hearing, but outside of my family, I don't do that. I'll listen, focus in a really focused way. And if I get what the discussion is, I'll stay with it. If I don't get what the discussion is, I'll keep quiet. I don't chime in and make guesses. And that's how, at least with me, my hearing impairment affects my interactions with my family and outside of my family. And that's a physical disability. A lot of our veterans have physical disabilities, and and that goes back to relationship problems. When I'm out socially, like in a group or something, I'll speak with a higher voice. I'll make my voice project. And I do that in compensation to the hearing problem I have. I know that when people hear me projecting louder and loudly, sometimes I'll hear, "Boy, you're really demanding," or "You're really abrasive." I hear that from folks because I speak louder because of my hearing impairment, anticipating that people themselves will speak louder to me so I can hear them better. So I have this, that many of us who are hearing impaired have that dynamic. going on with the way we speak loudly sometimes and the way we listen a lot closer to people who may not be projecting as well. So this physical disability does relate back to relationship problems sometimes, you know. And so these civilian risk factors that are here in front of us can be affected, can be different for veterans, I think. And that's one of my main points here. You know, those of us that are Native Americans, we have very significant histories of harm and very significant histories of grief and adverse childhood experiences. There have been some work on understanding better adverse childhood experiences with Native Americans, and I haven't seen any reports that show that Native Americans are not more strongly affected by adverse childhood experiences. And we know that I can say we know that veterans coming out of the military have significantly higher proportions of our veterans are come out with substance abuse problems. I tell people that I know that I learned to drink really well in the Army, and I learned how to sustain my drinking really well in the Army, and that's military life. I have two boys that are veterans, and they went through the same thing. And we bring that substance use and substance abuse, substance dependence back into civilian life. And you compound that with relationship problems, physical disability, and mental health conditions, PTSD, and it's just that ball of wax around the risk factors for suicide end up being a lot more difficult for many veterans. And we, I think, as a man myself, I look at these four things specifically as when I'm talking with a fellow veteran around how they're doing with their relationships, what kind of physical disabilities did they come with? Did they come out? Did they develop while in the military? What kind of physical disabilities do they have now that developed after discharge? And what are their experiences with substances in the military? What are their experiences with substances now? You know, and so I look at these three factors a lot, and how's that affecting their mental health? And so those are four key areas for me that are good to know.
Yeah. So Ray.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the same thing I'd look at, you know, and one of the flags is when I got a vet coming from the court, when he's assigned to come over and do a screening, you know, that's definitely the first flag right there. He's coming out of the court system.
Mm-hmm.
So then, you know, we start just like that, just looking into past experiences, any of the issues that they're having trouble dealing with, just based on their military experience. You know, because a lot of it is even just dealing with family issues. The usual coping is done through use. So, and that's usually that's how they end up. It's mostly DUIs. You know, that's how they'll end up in incarcerated.
Mhm.
And then to look at the history of that, you know, how many times have they been arrested for that?
Mm.
You know, and a lot of times I'll discover that they have been, since discharge, they've been going through life undiagnosed, with undiagnosed PTSD, and a lot of them reluctant to go to the VA,
Mhm.
or they just didn't know. They weren't on their out processing out of the military. They just weren't informed, you know, because a lot of the guys coming out of those situations, combat situations, you know, they were taught to suck it up, you know, just to deal with it, and so that's what they're trying to do.
Mhm.
And so once we could get them, have the referral done over to the VA, and then they can go through their process. The more often than not, you know,
Mhm.
they usually find out that, you know, that's what it is, and because
Mhm.
you know all the signs are there, you know, and they just don't understand that that's what it is, you know, and you know, and then there may be a small percentage of people that don't want to be labeled.
Mhm.
You know, some of the vets that don't want to be labeled with a disorder.
Mhm.
So, and I know there's been some advocacy to try to change that, to take the word disorder out of that,
Mhm.
because of some of the vets, they don't want that stigma, you know.
Mhm.
So, but to have that, and to have it taken out of the DSM-5, but you know, there's no progress on that. You know, that's going to
Mhm.
stay in. You know, but
Mhm.
um, you know, that's just some of the things that you know I see right up front. You know, is that a lot of times it's guys walk around undiagnosed, and they have no idea. You know?
Mhm. Or you're absolutely right about David, and I think we have people who, many of us veterans, we you know, I'll share this. When I was in the Army, in the field artillery unit, we all had hearing problems. Everybody that was with me, my buddies all had hearing problems. We all consumed alcohol frequently, um, and we understood that about each other. And that was the norm for us then. We um, and in a crazy kind of way, we supported each other for that. With that, and coming out of that context into the civilian world, where we don't have that kind of camaraderie, was really different. Not being around people who had the same kind of impairments that I did. I think maybe instead of using the word disability, we use impairment, for example, because they are impairments that we come out with, and was really challenging. Been away from my family for a long time, and I was more used to the kinds of brothers that I was with, as opposed to being with my family. And I knew other Navajo veterans in my area, and they're the ones I tended to hang out with more when I came out. But we also drank a lot, and we also um, watched each other that way, and we shared our stories together as veterans from that time. Um, but that's the nature of how we try to adapt back to what we had while being in the military. But eventually, you gotta move from that and deal with the relationships and deal with the disabilities differently. I mean, almost 40 years after discharge, I finally took the time and energy and accepted that I had a significant hearing impairment. 40 years, and went in for evaluation. It took me 40 years to accept that I had a really bad hearing disability impairment, and finally got that taken care of. And so acceptance, that word acceptance can be really difficult that way. And I'm a health provider, and I think about my brothers and sisters, especially the younger ones, and how they deal with that concept of acceptance, how we accept who we are and what we are, and our impairments in particular, and our differences, and build on that and change on that, and move towards better acculturating to the civilian world. And a lot of our brothers and sisters are unable to do that. Acceptance can be a really difficult thing for us to deal with. So I use that example of my hearing impairment as an example of how acceptance is really difficult. It's not that I developed a hearing impairment yesterday or the day before. This has been with me since 1971.
Hey, Ray, I got an example. So I did this training with Dr. Meyer, the creator of craft therapy, and he's a Navy vet. He's a Vietnam era Navy vet, and he told us that he walked around with PTSD for 25 years before he finally got diagnosed. And he was dealing with that whole time. And that may have been part of it, was just and he was already did all his training and working as a PhD and doing all the studies and everything. And yeah, he said 25 years it took him before he finally went in. And I think he might have been one of those people that just was like, I'm not going to the VA, that type of thing. So, yeah, that, it happens,
Yes. Thank you for your example. And you're right. Bob Myers is a really compassionate, passionate, empathetic man, and he'd be doing training on CRA, for example, and he'd talk about his challenges as a veteran, and continually working to acculturate to civilian life, and challenges that he's experienced like that. And I think that this discussion's good for us to have some acknowledgement about, particularly those of us who are not veterans, working with veterans. This idea or what the premise that we're offering, that coming from a military experience into a civilian world is not a piece of cake. And 46 years later, personally, my acculturating to civilian life is still a journey. And it's a journey that we take for the rest of our lives, I think. Coming in, there are some veterans that make that journey in a smoother way and a more transitionary kind of way. But for a lot of our veterans, particularly those that are combat veterans and have really tight relationships with their buddies. It's a lot more challenging, I think, and that's been what I see within my community of veterans, my friends who are veterans, my brothers that I joined the military with, and my nephews and nieces who are in the military, and my sons who are in the military. I see that fairly consistently with them. Randy Taylor, I'd like to ask you a question. You're saying you're intrigued about what you're hearing. Can you share that with us, please, Randy?
Yeah, thank you, Ray. I've never actually had the opportunity to hear, war veterans and their testimonies and all that they go through. So it's just it's stuff that I've never really heard before. So I just would like to say that I appreciate you, and I think it was Dr. Foster who had given his testimony a couple of weeks ago, and I just appreciate all that you've done, and just serving our country and all that you've had to deal with in the process. And I just wanted to mention that I know I've said this before, but I'm a vocal entertainer, and I sing for a lot of retirement homes. But I've recently started to make a list of local VFWs and to see if some of the veterans might need some entertainment sometime post pandemic and everything, because I like to use my singing to not only make a mega million for myself, but to be a blessing to others. So I think I try to make a list and see who would best benefit from just hearing good music. And I do a blend of basically Sinatra, Nat King Cole type music and doo-wop and things like that. So I'm always looking for places, where people can appreciate that. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you too very much. Yeah. Thank you too very much for your words. And we're coming very, very close to the top of the hour. And I felt this was a good time to look at the civilian risk factors and have a discussion about that, and do a comparison and contrast to what the veteran risk factors would be, but using this template as a springboard to have this discussion, and appreciate what we're hearing. And we can continue our discussion on this next session in 2 weeks, or move on. I'm working on a presentation on veterans and social media. And so as that develops, we will likely get into that topic. And Steve and I are very interested, and David and I are very interested in hearing what the rest of you feel might be good for us to touch on. And like I said earlier, if you feel like doing a presentation on your experience, let us know. Steve compensates very well, by the way. Okay, and so it's an opportunity to, really, make some money, a little bit of extra money, especially during these real difficult times. I don't know if anybody, if you're like me, you're spending a lot of money on sanitizing stuff, soap and things like that. And that's where what I get goes into, literally, is to that. So if you have ideas on what to talk about, please let us know, and we'll happily include you in the list of presenters. Tiffany, could you come on board and ask your question?
MMIW, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. I don't. Whenever I participate in one of these webinars, I really enjoy it. I like the work that you guys do. And so I was thinking maybe you've done it already, but if you haven't, I could email you my sister's work. She's done she made a Gus book, and it's a big traditional, it's oversized but it's a traditional like clothing that we wear here in Alaska. You pick people, and there's portraits of missing and murdered women on there. And I know that, like, trafficking, some of the earliest records of like human trafficking I know have been found for Aleut people here. We're Aleut, my sister and I, and we grew up in Dillingham. But I thought that would be really good. That might be a really good. She could kind of talk about that if you wanted.
Well, Tiffany, thank you very much, Guyana, for sharing your thoughts and ideas. I know very well gust bugs. I work in the YK Delta region for about a little over 5 years. And Steve and Ellen, who are here, can take your information and see how we can include your sister maybe as a guest presenter in one of the other webinars that we do. A whole series of things throughout the week, and this veterans part is one of it. But please put in your sister's information in chat, and Steve and Ellen can capture it and get a hold of her and see what we can do with that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And Steve has put out a survey that we see. We'd like to get your responses to this as well, Steve. So this is an opportunity for all of us to contribute. But as I mentioned, we'll get into veterans and social media, because that's social media and internet processing is very much a part of our lives today, and that's changing with our population too, veteran population. I want to thank all of you for joining us today and sharing your time for us, and Tiffany also for sharing your idea, Guyana. And Dave, can you do a closing blessing for us, please?
I take this from the MI, native MI. It's kind of geared towards as you're working with clients or as you're walking with your fellow veteran, you can think of how this too. So Wati Naya, Shrinaya, Asana Tokini, guide me to be patient, to be a patient companion, to listen with a heart as open as the sky. Grant me vision to see through her eyes and eager ears to hear her story. Create a safe and open meadow in which we may walk together. Make me a clear pool in which she may reflect. Guide me to find in him your beauty and wisdom. Knowing your desire for him to be in harmony, healthy, loving, and strong. Let me honor and respect her choosing of her own path and bless her to walk it free. May I know once again that although she and I are different, yet there is a peaceful place where we are one. Wow.
I want to thank Ray and David and Sean Baer did join us. He's there. And I want to also acknowledge Dr. Dan Foster, who joined us as well as several others that continue to join and be part of the solution here as we meet every other week. The polling question will help guide us a bit. I'll review these results with Ray and others, and looks like there's quite a bit of interest in, just at a glance, in topics related to spirituality, native healing techniques, and maybe some success stories. Those look like the top three coming in on the poll. So that might be something we consider. And I know Ray has something planned for next broadcast, but we're always looking for ideas, and your ideas and guidance help us provide things that you find useful and helpful in our journey together. So I want to thank everyone again. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. If you have a chance to fill out the survey, I would appreciate that. We all would. Please check out our website as well. Tiffany, I sent you my email, my university email. Please reach out to me, and maybe we can find a spot for your sister to do a presentation on the missing and murdered Indigenous women. I know that's part of our behavioral health. We've done some webinars on that in the past. So again, I want to thank everyone. Ray, any closing thoughts or comments?
Yeah, a couple of closing thoughts. We have about 28 people on this chat, and a couple have left early. But your 28 of you have a lot. We have a lot of shared experiences. Like I said, we all come from a variation of experiences. You all have expertise and knowledge that I really would like to listen to. That's why we're asking for you to do that. What we have planned further down the line, like this thing on veterans and social media, happily, it's not set. If one of you says you'd like to speak in 2 weeks, you have the floor. Okay? And that's how this is. This is very much a learning opportunity for all of us, and for me especially, because I'm a learner that way. And we'll look at the themes that are brought up, like spirituality and healing, and we'll work on incorporating them more. Sean Bear, who joined us, is very strong in those topics too. Maybe we'll twist his arm to do a talk for us also. But thank you very much, everybody. You take care of yourselves. Be safe. We have a long 2 or 3, 4 months ahead of us with this pandemic. Quarantine the best you can. And bless every one of you. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay connected.
See you next time.
Bye, everyone.